Thank you, Lizzie, and thank you all for having me. It's really an honor to be here. I love LARPers, and I love how self-aware this community is, and how attentive to the way that we construct ourselves, and therefore can construct ourselves differently. And in a sense, that's something that I try to bring to thinking about how we think about the future, or rather the futures, as I hope to demonstrate. So the point of departure for these remarks is really that the way we think about the future in our culture is has a lot of room for improvement, shall we say. The level of sort of literacy or attentiveness to the ways in which we construct these ideas and what the ideas about the future, what impact they have upon us, is lower than it should be. So strategic foresight, my field, is kind of about rigorously diversifying and deepening the sort of view of the landscape ahead in order to inform action now. It's not sort of just about the future for its own sake, it's in order to change what we do in the present to lead to different places. So in other words, it's for helping us get better and navigating the unknown. And I think that a good way to do that is to make it real, to sort of take it out of the abstract and make it performed, make it present. So the solution, or a solution that we've kind of, perhaps this is the ideal, right? If we wanted to really think well about possibilities, maybe the solution that if we could wave our wand and make anything happen, I think it would probably be something along these lines. Not necessarily a DeLorean, but a time machine. Because if we could visit these places and then come back to the present and be enriched and informed and empowered by those visitations, what could be better, really, for shaping our culture, for shaping our communities, and for navigating where we want to go. But I suggest that, although the DeLorean might not be available, and that, that sort of literal time travel is perhaps elusive, we do have kind of the next best thing. Structures for using and sharing our imaginations. And so the practice that Lizzie referred to in that introduction, Experiential Futures, is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's designing situations and stuff from the future to catalyze insight and change. And this is really rooted in the idea that cognition and creativity are social phenomena. They don't just sort of happen inside our heads, they happen between us. And so if you have come across these two little sort of sketches show on the left, design fiction and speculative design, which have become very popular in the design world over the last decade or so, kind of focus on the stuff, on things from the future. But Experiential Futures sort of says, well, what about just going there and making the construction, seeing the design canvas as being the situation that we can put ourselves in and interact with it. Now, this is all probably very obvious to you guys. It's sort of the point of departure for this whole undertaking in a way. But so it took a while. I didn't know that LARP existed really until about 3 years ago. And I found it enormously enriching to connect to this community of people who get this stuff right out of the gate and use it and play with it. And in some ways, I think there's still some catching up to do in this practice to what you guys take as obvious as a starting point. But so a decade of examples of things that we've done, creating immersive experiences like this was for the state of Hawaii 10 years ago to kick off a public consultation process about the creation of a sustainability plan for the islands. So we put 550 people into 4 different versions of the year 2050. These are some of them. This is particularly with my colleague Jake Dunnigan, who's a futurist based here in Austin now, actually. We started leaving artifacts from the future lying around for people to find and discover and sort of be puzzled by and perhaps amused by. We created postcards. A lot of these examples are from Hawaiian flavored because we did our postgrad work in Hawaii. But so, postcards from the future, which we would package up and send to people so that they would arrive, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, each morning a different missive from the future arriving in the Daily Post. And then these sorts of artifacts, this one kind of requires a little explanation out of the Hawaiian context, but this is a gift from the Chinese government to the people of Hawaii in the year 2028. And it's called the Statue of Harmony. And it's a depiction of Queen Liliuokalani, the last Hawaiian monarch who was overthrown by the United States in 1893, and Sun Yat-sen, the Chinese revolutionary, who went to high school in Honolulu. Now these figures require explanation here, but they are recognizable kind of icons in that context. And so the idea here of a kind of reconciliation of Chinese and Hawaiian political interests essentially cutting out the United States, which might be sort of an unpalatable idea in the present, but possibly one with increasing validity or attraction if China continues on its trajectory and the United States continues on its. So these sorts of ideas distill into encounters. This was about the gentrification of Chinatown, one of the oldest and from our point of view, most interesting neighborhoods in Honolulu. This was beginning to happen, the gentrification. We decided to accelerate it in simulated mode in order to force a conversation to the surface that was not happening at that time. So Starbucks was moving in. Well, it wasn't, but we made it look like it was. We had a Save Chinatown rally held outside that venue, and various other, these are all from different stories of what could happen in Chinatown. This is about a bird flu outbreak. Actually in 2016, so we're coming up on that. One of the weird things about this work is when when the future catches up with you. So what were we thinking? So dramatizing these ideas in the present through all sorts of different means, and as you can see, there's a bunch of different things. In the most recent iteration of the work, what you're seeing right now is the product of a kind of democratization of these processes. So a couple of years ago, we filled this vending machine with future artifacts, all created in one day by participants who didn't have any sort of necessary prior exposure to these ways of thinking, or even to physical design. And this was another one we did at New York University with a group called the Extrapolation Factory based there. And we created a bunch of street vendor merchandise from the future, and then took it down to the corner of Canal Street and Broadway and put it on sale. And this was, again, it's not about this, it appears to be about the stuff, but really it's about demystifying and making more approachable and playfully kind of available these, the notion that, the future might be an abstraction to us now, but we can tangibilize it. As Chris Webkin says, he's German, so he gets to do that with words. Tangibilization of the future turns out to be kind of a good way of befriending it. And then most recently, last September at USC, we did a project where this hotline, 1-888 Futures, was available to anyone in North America to call for free, and leave a dream, a message describing a dream, and a valid postal address for anywhere on the continent. And then all these people got together, picked up they were assigned to pick up one of the messages, they listened to it, and then turned the dream into an artifact. Recorded a quick message explaining what they'd made, and then packed it up and sent it to the person who was named in the address left in the message. So these are all sort of efforts in the domain of experiential futures. But the thing I want to show you today is about a particular pedagogy, a particular way of doing this that I've been using with my students at OCAD University and a few other places over the last 3 or 4 years. And it's called the time machine. So a time machine is basically an experiential futures brief to bring possible worlds to life on a participatory and immersive basis. So the brief really is to turn a room into a pocket of a future, which they've already sort of described in scenario form through work produced earlier in the semester. So here are the parameters. It's one room, 20 minutes of immersion, 25 to 35 people. It's like the class plus a few guests. People enter it cold. They have no idea what's in the room until they step into it, and it's a one-time thing. So it has to make sense to people. It has to kind of scaffold them in effectively from the moment they cross the threshold. And the aim is to, that's not a verb, the aim is to explore a future scenario's implications by visiting it. So some challenges. These are really just the first 5 that I thought of. Maybe you can think of others, and I'd be interested to hear what you think those might be. But so 5 challenges that come up when trying to turn futures into, conceptual futures into tangible experiences that you can inhabit for 20 minutes. One of those is the lack of objective reference points for what's going on in that room. I mean, versus, say, a historical setting where you can do your research, as Gabriel was saying, you can't really do that with the future, so that's a challenge. The second challenge, participants often have limited role-playing experience. So this is not, specifically for LARPers or people who opted into this as a practice or as a hobby. They are design students who are learning how to intervene in complex systems to hopefully nudge them in desired directions. And of course, at one level, I appreciate we all have unlimited role-playing experience because we're doing it all day, every day. But people can get a little self-conscious when they, when it's as clearly confected as a future experience sort of inevitably is. Third challenge: the short period to onboard and engage people in the experience. The fourth, the inbuilt tension between familiarity and novelty. And the fifth, ensuring useful takeaways, making it sort of stick, making it pedagogically useful, if you like. So those are the 5 challenges I want to tackle through showing you some examples that I think may do that, or that attempt to do that. So challenge number 1, the lack of objective reference points. Is this a problem? Versus, for instance, a historical setting. So the response really to that is that the lack of objective reference points is actually part of what makes this whole thing possible and worthwhile. So I'll see if I can make that clearer with a little bit of a kind of conceptual snapshot. So I think this is how a lot of people in the Western world think about time. The past is behind us, we're in the present, and then there's a future. And the further into the past you try to look, the more sort of dotted line-ish it gets. The record becomes a little fuzzy. And same with the future, and therefore, the implication of this is that if we can just sort of figure out what the future's going to be, then we'll be able to manage the risk, profit from it, avoid hazards X, Y, and Z, and so forth. Our starting point is really that's not the most helpful way to think about time. That a more helpful and probably more appropriate way to think about it, and this doesn't include the past because this diagram is only intended to show future possibilities. A more helpful way to think about it is as an expanding array of potentials that become more numerous the further out in time one tries to look. And therefore, an idea about the future can sort of be pictured as a particular swath, a particular pathway through that possibility space, but it's not the only one. By definition, in a way, if you want to think systematically about these possibilities, you can't talk about everything that could happen. So you take a cross-section, essentially, and talk about a range of alternatives. That's what scenario generation, scenario planning processes sort of do. But so, again, to come back to the challenge, really creating those reference points is the task. So it's not a matter of, trying to figure out what the future is going to be. It's a matter of generating potential answers that are interesting and plausible, or challenging. There are a lot of ways of approaching this. But creating those reference points, or what I really like what our colleague Christopher Tullo sort of says about LARP, that we're kind of creating these physical memories. And I also like the sort of the contradiction of creating physical memories of possible futures. That's the opportunity. So it's not really a challenge so much as the condition of possibility for all of this. So challenge number 2, participants limited role-playing experience. That's perhaps a little more pointed. So you have to offer approachable roles. right? To make it possible for people to step through the door and engage with this hypothetical future sort of out of the gate. So here are some examples. There are certain roles, certain situations that are readily engageable. So, and one, for instance, this is from last semester, some students looking at the futures of food created an exhibit from a hypothetical museum of natural history, which is commemorating the end of farming, because that's now an entirely technologized and automated profession in this future generation from now. And so the kinds of things, engaging in this as a witness or an attendee at a gallery is a relatively low bar in terms of role playing. And the stories that you can tell sort of through these artifacts are readily apprehended by people walking on through. Another example was a group was doing the futures of foreign aid. And in this future, foreign aid is a profit-making enterprise. So the event that they set up was a prospectus evening for investors in foreign aid. And we were given drinks and chit-chat and so forth, and this was an approachable way of making actually kind of an unpalatable future physically available to the attendees. Or this one, which was a content crimes tribunal from Canada in the year 2060 or so. And we were essentially members of a jury, which again, is not a particularly demanding role, because primarily you are there to absorb what the facts of the case and then render a verdict. Well, this group, which was looking at the futures of, I believe, social media, and we were testing out a medication as sort of members of a panel at this scientific trial of a new medication. Well, this group, which was looking at the futures of kids' mental health, and we were attending the opening of a new facility called Complete Me, which is a drop-in center in a highly medicalized, kind of disturbingly substance-dependent mode of enabling children's mental health. Or this time machine, which was the recording of a reality show about adoption, where the adoptee to be is at the center of the process, and they get to interview, and it's like a dating game. They get to decide who their parents are going to be. So some of these futures are desirable, some aren't. There's no sense in which the time machine is necessarily about visiting places where we want to go. In many cases, it's about understanding the contours of places that we might not want to end up in. Or the Arctic Futures referendum in 2040. So a good response to that sort of, can also up the ante as it goes. It doesn't have to be as passive as walking around in a gallery. It can become, it can be designed to enable people to participate more and more as the 20 minutes wears on, like at this auction, or this meeting of the city council in the year 2040, where we culminated in a debate and a vote, or this gathering of activists at to protest the encroachment of government surveillance on the internet, set about 10 or 15 years out. So all of these situations are essentially opportunities for people to emplace themselves into these possible, into these futures. And as you guys would well appreciate, this is an extremely rich and open-ended design space. So briefly, the third challenge, the short period to onboard and engage. The response to that is to design a rich context and cues that can orient and scaffold people in rapidly. So a lot of the time, this is a condo set in the year 2040 in Canada where there are no political representatives. People vote directly on constant referenda, which run sort of multiple times a day, through the medium of it was a classroom turned into a condo from the year 2040, which we could inspect. So it was kind of closer to immersive theatre than to LARP, perhaps. This was a play test of a redesigned edition of Monopoly intended to communicate a changed future for affluence. So the definition of wealth and the currencies that we live by are different in this future, and that was encoded in the well-known medium, sort of a riff on the well-known medium of this board game. So the fourth challenge, inbuilt tension between familiarity and novelty. The response there is providing the right amount of weird and minimal distractions from immersion. So the most effective of these time machines use the spaces in which they are set seamlessly. So it's kind of like in the role-playing notion of close to home or far from home. Casting the space so that it is played close to home is a way of helping people immerse in the future. So for instance, this time machine was set at a school, which is not difficult for a classroom at our university to play. That role is well within its capability. Well, this one, which was a brilliant future of the economy, in which we walked into the room, and this was a version of BMW, a meeting of the board of governors of BMW in Canada in 2035, where BMW has dismantled its luxury brand and become a community brand, which makes $400 million a year, but gives away all but $1 of that. And that was encoded in even the way the room was set up. When do you ever walk into a boardroom meeting where you just have people sitting in a circle, seeing each other? And this kind of crappy classroom setting was recruited as part of the story. This is not a company that needs to put on airs, because in this future it has deliberately gone in the other direction. And so the fifth and final challenge, ensuring useful takeaways. Well, really, the response here kind of is in part inspired by our experience with LARP, and Nordic LARP in particular, that debriefing is part of the opportunity space. So it's not as if the 20-minute experience has to contain every possible lesson, so that just by walking into it you are thereby enlightened and sort of fully futurized. You can have a conversation about it afterwards and design for that. So these conversations, this is actually work that a student of mine did earlier this year, Mike Stolberg, where he did a qualitative analysis of people's responses to time machines, and found that there were 4 different levels that they were kind of reacting on. The gut level, the sort of inner world or diegetic responses, the outer world, extra diegetic responses, and the design reflections, which I suppose is a special subset of the extra diegetic. And what one can do is design these conversations to surface those layers of response and knit them together in a way that that enriches and helps to hard code the experience that people have just had as something worthwhile. This group also used role play in the debrief. So we were analyzing it after visiting the agriculture exhibit about the end of farming. We walked in and were cast in the role of, into the debrief, we were cast in the role of members of the government, of the former farming community, of the agri-tech community, and of the citizenry. And then we talked about what we liked and didn't like about the scenario that we had just experienced. So that ensuring useful takeaways can be done through that kind of thoughtful use of not just the immersion, but the post-immersion conversation. So the design space is vast, and I've been doing this for, I don't know, like I said, 3 or 4 years. I'd say probably 3 or 4 dozen times we've, instances of time machines that we've done, and visited Olympic villages and all manner of provocative and interesting times and places. If you think about moving from a scenario, a hypothetical story about the future to a situation like the one that we're in now, at a one-to-one scale, there's a vast number of ways that you can do that, as you would appreciate. And so the opportunities to bring people into these futures may be wider than we assume. For example, it was a nature deficit disorder clinic set in the year 2040. So certainly an example of one of those futures that nobody associated with it sort of particularly wants, but that we thought would be edifying to manifest for conversation purposes. So NaturePod is a hypothetical product from the year 2021, which we launched as if it were a real product at the biggest architecture and design trade show in Canada in December. And that video just came out the week before last, I think. And so we were essentially having, well, there's a rabbit hole here we don't have time to go to, but I'd love to chat about it another time. We created a LARP that people didn't realize was a LARP in order to provide an opportunity for them to think about where our relationship with nature is going, and the use of technology sort of to make ever more sophisticated substitutes. So yeah, we'll another time check out NaturePod. It's kind of the video I think showcases the work of the design team really nicely. And thank you for your attention.